Hey, everybody, it's Scott Leckie from Democracy Tomorrow, the world's world citizen podcast. We try to cover democratic developments around the world as much as we can. And just today, moments ago, the polls closed in national elections in Argentina for a portion of the seats in their Senate and a portion of the seats in their House. And we have with us right now our longtime friend, Pablo Rueda, who's speaking to us from neighboring Uruguay, but who is an Argentine and who followed the elections very closely. And he is going to announce the results before us very live right now in these really important elections in the run up to the next presidential elections, which will occur in 2027 in Argentina. So, Pablo, first of all, welcome back to Democracy Tomorrow. And second of all, let's have it. What are the results?
Okay, Scotty, very happy to be here with you as always. And now that I'm happy to be with you, I can say that Milei won by far the election. He even won in the province of Buenos Aires, which he lost by more than 10 points a couple of months ago. Unbelievable results. Nobody predicted these results. Fewer people attending to vote, but in similar percentage as the election in the province of Buenos Aires of 2 months ago, which was also very low. But the results are completely different.
What do you attribute this to? 'Cause everything I read running up to the election was predicting that this would not be the case. I did notice that voting numbers were lower than anticipated or than historically. I think it was the lowest turnout since 1983, since democracy returned to Argentina 42 years ago. How do you explain both of those phenomena? Why did fewer people vote than normally? And why did a government which is really sort of stagnating at the moment compared to its first months in power win such a convincing landslide? What do you attribute it to?
Very difficult. One easy question is to respond is why people are not attending to vote. And that is because what you have in the alternative candidates are mainly extremes. You have a Peronist party that represents the opposition today, which is very much associated with very bad governments, Peronist governments of the past, and has no renewal language in the message. And on the other side, you have the government party that has lowered inflation, has changed certain behaviors of society regarding protest, mainly cutting of roads and things like that, that people were very, very, very angry about the continuity for decades of that system. But other than that, it's a government that has shown a tremendous incapability of dealing with other government situations. For example, there is no education policy in Argentina. Everything is the economy, and everything is inflation, not economy, because the economy is very bad. The inflation has been lowered, but the economy is very bad. There is a recession. There is a default. Argentina is in default, at least what bankers define as technical default. Doesn't have the money to pay its debts. And that has not changed. And the environment, the economic environment in Argentina does not show signals of long-term investment projects other than those that are under the umbrella of a special regime that has been created that provides stability for the next 30 years. So why only you have investment for that? Because people believe that if the opposition wins in 2027, they will change completely the regulatory environment, making those investments fail. In addition to that, the government seems to be aligned with the Peronist, which is Trump, a real Peronist, very in the far right of the spectrum globally, with the Italian government too aligned, and many people don't like that. And many people don't like the lack of dialogue and political work with the opposition and with other parties that this government has from the beginning showed. Lack of building policies together, building consensus in the political spectrum. No, they are absolutely isolated, and the policy is to speak very badly of anyone making any criticism to the government or thinking different. So a big portion of the country dislike any political alternative of those who are fighting for the government, which are the Peronists and the Libertad Avanza, which is the party of Milei now in government. In those two, all the center between those two alternatives has disappeared. Macri's government, which was more center than Milei, is almost non-existent. Center left, with less contact with corruption and excess spending of the Peronists, is also disappeared. There's no alternative. So the center has disappeared. So many people, many Argentines don't vote because they are not represented by any candidate with chances to even to become a representative.
Right. I'm just looking at the Clarín newspaper website right now, which has the latest results of the election, and La Libertad Avanza, that's Milei's party, got 40.81% of the vote. So 4 out of 10 people voted for them, and the Peronists, the Fuerza Patria and Aliados party got 44 seats and only 31.6% of the vote. So they won by 10% plus. Or no, 9% plus. But, and then Provincias Unidas, yeah, less than like 8 point, yeah. Well, what is it? 8.4, 9.2% they won by, yeah, which is a convincing amount. The Provincias Unidas and Aliados got 7%. Izquierda, the left-wing grouping, got 3 seats, 4.77%, and then the Provinciales got 4.2%, and other parties got 11.45%, but a clear majority. And this is a government which is highly controversial, which is extremely close to Trump. Trump has agreed to give 40 billion dollars, depending on who you listen to Argentina, which is a controversial issue in and of itself in the United States. During the middle of a government shutdown, when there's no public expenditure officially taking place, they've decided to give, unattached billions to a government which has been accused of all sorts of malfeasance. I mean, there are lots of corruption charges that have been made against the Milei government. There are all sorts of critiques in terms of poverty levels, dramatic cuts to government programs and government agencies. Yes, they did tackle inflation, but that battle has been ongoing and has not had many reductions in recent months after an initial period of tackling it quite strongly. And as you said, a growing history of mistrust of the political status quo. And, very much what you have in the United States, a country which is now trying to somehow latch onto Argentina in ways that it has never done before. I mean, of course, there was always tacit support given to the military regime and things of that nature, but it's always been sort of a country that didn't really figure prominently within U.S. foreign policy, and now does. And so I read recently that Chat GPT and Sam Altman and co are attempting to build a data center in pristine Patagonia, investing potentially $25 billion US into this AI data center down there. So clearly there are all sorts of forces at play. There's probably resource forces at play, lithium, gas, oil, whatever it may be that Argentina is famous for. But how big would you attribute the Trump slash United States factor in this election result?
Well, one important factor is fear. And what Trump said about if Milei does not win the election, that will mean that I will not support any more Argentina. Now that we see the newspaper the next day, it played an excellent political move. Because one of the reasons Milei won is that people knew that if Milei lose, they will have immediate crisis. So you can believe that Milei policies will end up in a crisis. Yes, that there are many elements to believe that. But if Milei loses the election, people were sure, and probably they were right, that a severe crisis will start the day after.
Right, right. So do you think that was part of the thinking behind the very unusual for an extreme right-wing party like the Republican Party of the United States to willy-nilly, with no discussion, no negotiation, suddenly dangle $20 billion in front of a government which has repeatedly a country which has repeatedly defaulted on debt, which is the biggest debtor nation to the International Monetary Fund, which has a really bad history in terms of taking money from foreign sources and misusing it and misallocating it and creating a worse situation than it was in before. Suddenly going, oh, with that track record, we'll give you 20 billion, of course, maybe even 40 billion to prop things up. It seems to me like one could easily imagine that that was the thinking all along, that because they are ideological bedfellows, Trump and Milei, and it's very clearly indicated as such, that the most leverage that Trump could exercise would be to dangle a bunch of money, then threaten to withdraw it, and instill fear, as they always do, and get people to vote in a certain way. Very interestingly, viewed from a macro political perspective, we monitored democracy around the world. By the way, in stark contrast to what happened in Argentina today, just a few hours ago, yesterday, Ireland elected its most left wing president in the history of that country, a country which is very often in the progressive camp. So, completely contrary development to what went on here. Now, one could easily imagine that the scenario I was painting with regard to Trump's dangling the money was done in that way because, once again, in a completely opposite fashion, two countries which are extremely close to the United States in many ways, Australia and Canada, both former British colonies, of course, were almost assuredly going to go in a more conservative direction in the last two elections in those countries, and instead didn't, largely in reaction to Trump. And particularly in the case of Canada, but here in Australia, the Labour Party obviously greatly increased its majority in the parliament, largely in reaction, again, to Trump. So you have the opposite phenomenon happening, interestingly, in a fellow Southern Hemisphere country that's emerging from winter into spring now, Argentina and Australia. Both start with A, both end with A, but they went very different ways. So how do you see this playing itself out? Because it seems that Milei now will have enough seats in parliament to be able to block initiatives by the other parties who actually, between all of them, have more seats than Libertad Avanza.
Well, excellent question, because one fact that you cannot discuss is that bailouts in Argentina always failed, always, particularly those which were used to sustain artificially the value of the foreign exchange.
Right. It's almost like populism at a broader level and or
It is the
fascism.
same.
They
It
always
is the
fail,
same.
and people that vote for it, they simply never look back at history and show. There was a great article yesterday in, I think, The Guardian or somewhere else that showed scientifically that all these different regimes which had voted for populist solutions ended up 10% or more worse off economically than when the process started. Is there any reason to think Argentina is going to be different now?
Well, one thing that surprises many people is how can the United States participate in a bailout to support the foreign exchange control, artificial control, which if you project Argentine economy, it will fail. And that money will disappear in few days, because they put money in the market to sustain the exchange rate until a devaluation is inevitable, and you lost all the money you played. That happened in Argentina with Macri, with De la Rua, in many Argentine crises. Now, to see that the United States is putting their own money to do that is incredible. So, in my opinion, Perón, because in my opinion, Trump works as very similar to Perón. Perón was a governor that was slightly dictator and very protective of the local economy, which is a substitution of imports with high tariffs, exactly as Perón. Trump is not a liberal. Milei says he's a liberal and joins with someone which is completely anti-liberal. Trump, in my opinion, because he is funding this new moment or post-election of the Argentine economy, I believe that the economic policy will substantially change. I believe that there will be a devaluation to put the foreign exchange in a more market price. I don't know how much, but I don't see Trump and his team allowing this money to disappear because of an economic policy that wants to control inflation through artificial controlling the exchange rate.
How do besides obviously, if somebody offers a poor country, and unfortunately, Argentina is now definitely not the rich country it once was. But if somebody offers a country that has financial troubles, 20 or $40 billion, it's very hard to say no, right? So there's are all sorts of neo-colonial associations with this sort of behavior. And once again, viewed more broadly in the context of US policy towards Latin America generally, which has a dismal track record dating back to the Monroe Doctrine and Manifest Destiny and everything else, and so many military interventions, so many invasions, so many occupations, so many supporting governments of military dictatorships and other horrible regimes. After largely, or at least comparatively, ignoring the region for the past 20 years or so, 30 years or so, I guess you could say, more or less, being benign towards it. I mean, they still always have the perpetual blockade on Cuba. They still always support anti-drug measures in the region and always support pro-US investment and things like that. But now they're getting very, very militaristic, particularly in the Caribbean with regard to Venezuela. They've already illegally destroyed 8, I believe, or 10 or 12 or 14, I don't know how many boats in both the Caribbean and the Pacific Coast that they allegedly were drug running ships, but there's been no proof at all provided that these were drug running boats wantonly murdered. You have the highest concentration of military buildup of supplies by the US military in the Caribbean for decades, just off the coast of Venezuela, even boats that are harbored now in Trinidad and Tobago, right next door. And then you have all the sanctions which have recently been released in the last week against the President Petro of Colombia, and so on and so forth. It sure seems to me, from a geopolitical State Department perspective, that this ever deepening embrace with Argentina could also be part and parcel of a longer term strategy to draw Argentina much more closely into the US orbit, away from its traditional closest allies within Latin America. What do you think of that?
I completely agree. I believe that this is not a fight between freedom and communism, as Trump wants to put it. This is a fight of the United States as global leader against China, China is clearly winning the situation, and there is a alignment of global powers in which China is becoming more and more relevant. And the United States is fighting with very different measures to try to survive and keep a position. One of those tragedies is to secure Latin America for the United States. And that is far from being a reality today. If you see investment of foreign direct investment in Latin America, China wins by far. But they see Milei as a great ally to try to construct this new involvement of United States in Latin America. In the relation with Argentina, the United States is not a good commercial partner of Argentina because the United States exports a lot of hydrocarbons. We want to be a global exporter of hydrocarbons. With LNG projects, with exporting crude oil, we have conflicting interests. So how will this alignment be constructed? I don't know, probably with artificial intelligence and all these projects that need a lot of progress to become a reality. Because when you start to make such kind of projects in Argentina, you see that Argentine labor regulations compared to other countries in the world are very high. So what is the advantage of investing in Argentina? Still to be seen. Extreme political risk, high labor costs. There is still a lot of work to do to have Argentina being an attractive country to receive investments, particularly long-term investments. Everything I think, is short-term minded. United States wants to start constructing strong alignments in Latin America, and the only opportunity they have today is Milei, so they
Right.
use it.
Well, I've heard a lot of talk about, one of the groups in the United States that's suffering the most, not just because of the government shutdown, but this general policies of the extreme right-wing Republican Party are beef farmers in the United States, and they're suffering greatly. And yet, at the very same time, the Americans are talking about suddenly wanting to buy a whole bunch of Argentine beef, which is opening up a lot of eyes. Like, what in the world is going on? You're depressing your so-called America First movement, where you're meant to be supporting American workers, including farmers, including beef farmers. You're just dismissing them and instead offering to buy large amounts of, granted, some of the best beef in the world. Couldn't make asado without it. So what's happening there? Why are the Americans offering to buy Argentine beef all of a sudden?
Because they have the idea that they can build a trade agreement with Argentina. And if you want to discuss a trade agreement with Argentina, the first issue is beef, is hydrocarbon. It's all the things that the United States has and exports, and we have an export. So very conflicting, very difficult to have an agreement between the two countries.
Did Trump impose tariffs on Argentina? I can't remember.
10%.
Uh,
Uruguay.
Yeah, and a bunch of countries that he doesn't hate. That's the only reason. That's the only rationale. And did Argentina impose reciprocal tariffs on the United States?
No, because our tariffs are still higher
Still
than
higher. I
those.
think things are going to go from here. I mean, with this new surprising election result, this must be music to the ears of all the
Uh,
the anti-Peronists and the pro-Milei camp, and this must increase his chances of winning in the next election. Where do you think things will go?
Okay, in first place, I would love to be seen as an expert on the future of Argentine economy and the world's economy. And the truth is, I have no idea what is happening to the world and no idea what is happening to Argentina. Everything seems to be going wrong, and people still vote and support going in ways I believe will go to a disaster. But that is what is happening. So in my idea, the positive idea is that I believe that the typical liberal, in Argentina, liberal is capitalist right. It's not the liberals of the United States
The
or
entire world, my friend, the entire world.
okay,
Only los gringos say
okay,
liberal is left, right?
uh,
195 other countries, everyone knows liberal means free trade, free everything, right? Freedom, freedom, freedom.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
That
So,
that
but good luck.
liberalism, that
Yeah.
that liberalism in Argentina governed many times in the past and always failed, and particularly failed because they sustained an artificial exchange rate to maintain inflation and to allow investments to come in, no?
Hmm.
The ability to take debt at low exchange rates, creating a bubble that in the medium term ended in default. That happened many
Mm.
times,
Yes.
more or less 4 or 5 times in the past. This is not new
Hmm.
in Argentina.
Hmm.
What I see that is new is now that the Americans are our owners, I don't see the Americans doing the same mistake
How will the
because it's their
Argentine
money now.
Yeah, but how will the Argentine population react once they fully understand that it's not a gift? It's an ownership proposition. It's a lack of
Well, I
autonomy.
think that many Argentines don't care.
They just don't
No, they
care.
don't care.
Right,
No, 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 no.
right.
And also, a very important element is that when Milei signed the agreement with the IMF, he said the foreign exchange rate will go to from 1,100 pesos per dollar to 900 pesos per dollar. He sells himself as the great economist. The dollar went from 1,100 to 1,500.
Right.
So this idea of keeping the foreign exchange low is very, very dangerous, has been the policy in the past of other liberal governments, and every time has failed. Now the money is given by the United States. My position, my view is that the United States, I don't see them being so stupid of burning billions of dollars to do that policy.
Well, that remains to be seen.
That remains to be seen.
Ironically, it's almost the same exact amount that the United States Agency for International Development was spending in more than 100 countries, saving tens of millions of lives every year.
Imagine using that money only for a policy of sustaining an exchange rate,
Yeah, I know.
which for sure will fail, because that is not,
Mhm.
you're not spending it even in military equipment. You are giving the money so that Argentines can buy tickets to go to Miami to consume because the exchange rate is low.
Right, right. Right. Well, as you know, we've discussed in the past, Argentina very famously, not all that long ago, maybe 5 generations ago, was one of the richest countries on earth. I think it goes all the way up to number 3 at the change of the century from the 1800s to the 1900s. Around that time, it was about the 3rd richest country on earth. Let's also not forget that Haiti was once the richest country in the Western Hemisphere as well. So things, it's a very good, warning that things can change, and that once things get so entrenched, it can take decades, if not centuries, to climb out from under that rubble. And as we've discussed before, there's no country in the world that has a higher percentage of people that are engaged in psychotherapy than Argentina. And whatever the cause of that may be, I am convinced that part of it is this cognitive dissonance between, hey, wait a minute, we're supposed to be one of the richest, most sophisticated, advanced cultures in the world, and in many respects you are. But at the same time, every day the cost of my loaf of bread is going up by a few pesos and my income isn't. And after a while, that's got to get to you. It's got to be like just so depressing. And combined with the poverty rate is around 50% or so. And that's being generous in terms of measuring what poverty actually means. So yeah, it's a country which really should be doing a lot better than it is, based upon the resources you have and the history and the incredibly high level of education and sophistication. And you did it on the football field. So, you should be able to do it in the global political and economic
Well,
field.
one pessimist view is, if you see the Argentine football team, they behave as a team.
Right, right.
They had a very good relation between old guys and young guys.
Hmm.
You had a leader that was very modest and very behind the team. That's in the football.
Mm.
In politics, we still have this antagonistic, I am the only one that can save the country, and the rest of the politicians are all a disaster. And Argentina will not have any chance if they do not resolve the issue of alternance. If 2027, the result is that a new government gets into power and changes radically what has been done by the previous government, which has happened in the history of Argentina for the last 70 years. Argentina has no chance. So whatever the economic policy, whatever everything will break down if this political antagonism continues. And you can compare that with other countries of Latin America. Lula can win against Bolsonaro, and that's a big change from a political perspective. But in the economy, there are certain issues that are maintained in the Brazilian economy. Peru is a disaster in politics but the central bank keeps the economy aligned in the long term, whatever the president. They are all in jail, and the economy continues to be sustainable. The same with Chile, Colombia, even Colombia. In Argentina, all the political alternatives are radical in respect of the other. They destroy absolutely what has done in the past government. They think completely different. All the problems of Argentina are on the other side, always. So if that is not resolved, having good policies or bad policies is the same.
Right. Well, maybe just to finish on a more positive note, I mean, we together, you and I, and many other people in the world, have worked a lot on this issue of moving our world closer to a world citizenship scenario where we have a global government, which all of us participate in and vote on, and which actually finally, after 200 or 300,000 years of existing as humans, we finally understand collectively that we're all from the same planet and dependent on that very same planet, and that unified, we are far stronger and far better than being split up into different groups. Maybe when you have an election result like today, it will get at least a few people to stand back and say, maybe it really is time to do something in a completely different way. You have the fact that fewer people participated in this election than at any time since democracy. We do need to reiterate this was a fair and free election as far as we can tell. It
Yeah,
continues the new democratic tradition of Argentina since 1983, which is an incredibly positive thing. Nobody's
true.
disputing the results, and nobody's expecting a military coup like in 1976, et cetera. So, that's a positive thing. But fewer people voting is always a bad sign. It always indicates they don't like what they can vote on and they don't trust the system to facilitate positive change. That combined with the economic circumstances of Argentina and just the moribund nature of most of the political parties and movements there, maybe this signals a small opening for those that are inclined, as we are, to favor the idea that all of us on planet Earth are equal and the same. We should exist within a political environment which recognizes that. And so, one of the things we're doing, this is just a good time to mention it, is we've come up with like a generic global draft resolution that every single government, every single local government in the world could potentially sign on to, which indicates local support for the concept of world citizenship, but also the legal institutionalization and official status giving of this idea that we have of just Gaia, so world citizenship, at the local level. So we've already started talking to local governments here in Australia and beginning to make approaches to other local governments around the world. And we hope to have that resolution online within the next week or two. It's designed to be as acceptable to a local government in Gaborone, Botswana, as it is to a local government in Buenos Aires or in Montevideo or in Melbourne or anywhere else. And our goal there really is to concretize this idea that is generally seen by a lot of people as an esoteric concept that will never come true, some impossible dream, but to make it possible and to make it real and to give something that people can actually grab onto and say, hey, my local government has accepted the idea that we are all world citizens. You don't have to give up your nationality. You don't have to give up your local citizenship or your culture or your religion or anything. You just gain one more. And that's your world citizenship status. And one of the really crucial elements that we put in this resolution is that if government X signs on to this, agrees, besides conferring world citizenship status on all of those within its jurisdiction, it agrees legally to recognize the legal world citizenship status of any other local government in the world that adopts the same resolution. So if a local government in, let's say, Punta del Este, Uruguay, adopted this resolution, and the Marybeck Council in Melbourne, Australia, was to adopt the same resolution, they would have mutually reciprocal recognition arrangements between those two governments. We recognize your world citizens, you recognize ours. And once we get 10 or 20 or 1,000 or 10,000, however many local governments there are in the world, to sign on to this, we then start building the very real legal basis for having a world based upon what we think is a far superior way than the way we've done it in the last 400 years. So that's just a spin-off effect of maybe this.
Completely agree, Scotty.
Right on. Well, we need more people to think in that direction.
Any final comment? Let's imagine how a world would work if, in addition to being a citizen of a nation state, when you are born, you will have a certificate that you are a citizen of the globe, with agreement with all nation states in the world that that registry will exist. So those kids will already be raised and will be educated, knowing that in addition to be a nation state citizen, they are part of something bigger and more unified. Only with that, the positive effects in the globe will be enormous.
Yeah, and I think there's already, I mean, I always say this, but I'm certain there's hundreds of millions of people who are very much ready to do this today, who have traveled the world, who know people from other places. And so much of it comes down really in the end to exposure. So when you don't know anybody from Argentina, for instance, you have an image in your head of what it's like, but it's not the same as knowing somebody from there, or China, or Russia, or the United States, or anywhere. And the more of us that get to know more people from more places, it's impossible not to see the similarities that we all share, and that those are so much higher in number than the differences. And the differences are what make life worth living. There's nothing wrong with differences. Differences are great. What you're going to eat for dinner tonight, or had dinner already probably, is, it'll be similar to what I have, but not exactly the same. And it's those differences that make it interesting and make life worth living.
I cook much better than you.
Not even close. Not even close. Gotta love Russia or Ukraine. They fight out, who invented it. I made borscht today from beets from my own garden. Can you top that? Can you top that? Yeah, borscht is good. So, anyways, well, thank you very much, Pablo, for the
Thank you.
updates just hours after the polls close in Argentina. We'll have Pablo back on Democracy Tomorrow soon, of course. We'll be reporting back to you in about 4 days on the night of the elections that are coming up in the Netherlands, a country also close to my heart, where I'm also a citizen. They have big elections on the 29th of October. Who knows what the results will be? It could be shockingly good. It could be shockingly bad. We'll have to wait and see. But we'll be speaking to Huub van der Wouden from the city of Utrecht in Holland live that night to get election results from there. So thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe and like if you like what we do. Please suggest topics or comments or guests for future episodes, and we'll try our best to get those guys on. And we will continue to hope that we can open up spaces across the world for more and more democracy for more and more people in more and more places. So thank you again, Pablo, and all the best. Thanks for watching. Take care. Peace.
Bye-bye. Thank you.